question like is a lead up to the following question. So sometimes questions aren't really just a question, they're just really just an introduction. Also, in general, I would say the first 5-6 questions in general is mostly just general introduction, getting some terms clear. Okay, in general, what we covered in the halachas of cooking on Shabbos, there's the first part, which is what is considered the malacha. What do you do to a food that's considered cooking as far as Shabbos is concerned? That's the first part. Then there is specific conditions about how to keep stuff on the fire before Shabbos. When you want to continue cooking, that's called shehiyah. Then there's halachas of chazara when you want to return something to the fire. And then there's halachas of hatmana when you want to insulate something. So those are the 4 parts or sections within this general topic. I didn't break it apart, like make like a different title or whatever it is, but you'll see that's more or less the order of the questions. So we're going to go through them one by one. Number 1 is just clarifying what is called the starting point of bishul. Starting point is not really a term that's discussed in Shulchan Aruch. It's just a term that I made up to use in order to gain clarity. So what I mean by that is, at what point when you begin to cook something, at what point is it considered that you're starting to cook it, and therefore you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos? How much do you have to heat something up that it's considered that you're beginning to cook it? So there's a din for liquids and a din for solids. So for liquid foods, it's yatzeh. Now, for these purposes, yatzeh is going to mean anything more than 110 degrees Fahrenheit for this question. As opposed to a different question, it's going to have a different temperature. We'll see why. So for these purposes, it means heating anything up to more than 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 43 degrees Celsius. For solid foods, things that don't really have any liquid with them, it means cooking it till it's ma'achel ben drusai, which is, for these purposes, 1/3 of the way cooked. So if you do it less than that, if you heat something up but it's less than yatzeh lettuce, then you didn't really begin to cook the item. And that should technically be okay on Shabbos. What's the end point of bishul? That's the opposite. When is an item considered to be finished cooking as far as halacha is concerned, and therefore any subsequent additional cooking that you do is insignificant and allowed? That's what I mean by end point. So
there's no end point because it's hot as hot.
Right, but there is a certain point when an item is at a certain point, we say it's already cooked, and therefore you could do certain actions that are going to cause it to cook more. You could put it back on the fire, you can cover it, you could, right?
So after which it is what?
So at what point do we say that a food is already completely cooked halachically?
After
it's
which
finished
it
cooking,
is?
after which any subsequent thing that you do is not really called cooking on Shabbos.
So it's inconsequential.
Yeah. So for liquids, some say it's boiling. That's my Yosef, that's 212. But once it's actually boiling, that's a stricter opinion. And there's others say that it's also yatzeh lettuce, so that's the starting point and the end point. However, for this question, when we say yatzeh lettuce, we mean 160 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is Celsius. We one time checked it on the phone. 160 degrees Fahrenheit. For solid foods,
We're going with the 212.
we're going with the lenient one. The simple indication is, well, the way many many great Rabbanim understood the Alter Rebbe's opinion was that he held that it's Yatzei lettuce. He held like the lenient one. So that's what we can follow. That's for liquid. That's like for water. What about for a food? So for a food, it has to be what's called mevushal kol tzarkoi. The precise parameters of the definition of that is a later question.
Mevushal shell.
Mevushal kol tzarkoi. If you look at question 5, that's where that phrase is. So we're going to define it later.
We didn't cover that, did we? Did we say mevushal kol tzarkoi?
Maybe before you came. And we were going back now all the way to the beginning, so it could be. Mevushal kol tzarkoi means fully cooked. The precise parameters of that we're going to discuss in a minute in its own question. So again, so what's the end point of bishul? When is an item considered to be finished cooking? That any additional cooking that you do is inconsequential halachically. Is for liquids, it's Yatzei lettuce, but we have to take a higher temperature of Yatzei lettuce, which is 160. And for solid foods, it is mevushal kol tzarkoi, when it's fully cooked. The exact definition of fully cooked we'll give a little bit later on. Number 3, does the prohibition of cooking on Shabbos apply to foods edible in the raw state? Is it only if you cook a potato, or is it even if you cook an apple? So the thing is, even if you cook something which is already edible, it's still considered cooking. Cooking isn't making something edible. Cooking is changing the form, from using the heat to change the form. It doesn't matter that it's edible or not. Number 4, what's the shear? What's the amount of Yatzei lettuce bite? First, the definition. Yatzei lettuce bite means that your hand reflexively moves back from when you touch it and you're not ready, you're not expecting it to be hot. Your hand will reflexively move back. It doesn't mean that it's going to burn your hand. If you want to try to hold it, there's no problem holding it. Yatzei lettuce. It means that it's going to be, if you're not prepared for it, if you didn't expect it to be hot, you're going to pull your hand back reflexively. That's the definition of it. What does it mean in terms of temperature? We can't prove in a precise temperature of what it is. We know that it's for sure not less than 110. Meaning we know that less than 110 is for sure not Yatzei lettuce bite. That we can prove. And we also know that more than 160 is for sure Yatzei lettuce bite. Okay?
So it's
however,
between
we can't
110 and
prove,
160.
right? We can't prove a precise temperature. So therefore we have to be strict. And that's the reason why in question 1, when we were talking about, what's the beginning point of cooking, we said you have to be strict that it's already 110. When we were talking in question 2, what's the end point of cooking, so you can only be lenient and assume once it's 160. Right? We have to be strict on both ends.
I thought Yatzei lettuce, well, in the first sense anyway, was like, isn't that warm? I thought it's just warm. I didn't realise it's not hot, but it's quite hot, Yatzei lettuce.
Well, it's meant to be, that's the temperature that's meant to be, that's considered hot.
Right.
According to halacha, that it can transfer taste, that it can cook on Shabbos. But we can't prove precisely exactly what the temperature is. We can just prove that it's less than 110. That it's for sure not less than 110. And we know by 160 already, we know for sure that it is. So we have to be strict in terms of, so that's why when we were discussing what's the starting point of cooking, so you have to be strict that already at 110 it's considered to be cooking. When we were discussing the end point, when is it finished cooking, and now you can cook more if you want, right? It's already Yatzei lettuce, and now if you want you can cause it to boil. So for that it has to be something that you know for sure it's Yatzei lettuce. So that's why we said over there it means 160. Number 5, what is the shear? What's the amount? What's the definition or the parameters of mevushal kol tzarkoi? Okay, what that means is something is fully cooked. What does fully cooked mean halachically? That means that it's readily edible for the average person under normal circumstances. three things. Because you can have sometimes, what I mean by readily edible means that sometimes certain foods, they can taste better if they cook longer. But they're still readily edible right now. They're soft, it's good to eat, right? So that's, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be better if it cooks more. It could be that it's going to be better if it cooks more. But it's already ready. It's ready to eat. Now for the average person, I mean, is because you're going to find some people that like their food raw or whatever it is, right? In Halacha, we speak about a group of people that would eat their food raw. Michael ben Rusai, bandits, they would eat the food raw. When it was only a little bit cooked. It would mean an average person. And under normal circumstances, we mean, yeah, you might find somebody who, if he's running away during wartime or something, he'll eat his food raw or partially raw. But under regular circumstances, this is how he wants his food. So that's what it means, the Moshe Gotzarbe. Fully cooked, it means readily edible to the average person under normal circumstances. That's what it means, fully cooked. And even though the additional cooking might be beneficial to the food, still it's considered finished cooking, and you're allowed to do on Shabbos something which can cause it to cook more. In other words, push it closer to the fire or whatever it is, something that's going to cause it to cook better. You would be allowed to do it once it's fully cooked, because at this point, that's the end point of Bishul, and beyond that, you're not really doing anything significant as far as Hilchos Shabbos is concerned. May one place food, number 6, may one place food to which Bishul applies near the fire for a short time, being careful to remove the food before it reaches the starting point of Bishul. So I'm going to put a cup of water next to the fire, and I'm going to say, or on the fire, and I'm going to say, I'll remember to take it off before it reaches Yatziletis. I'll take it off when it reaches 100 degrees. I'll watch it and I'll make sure. Therefore, I'll make sure it doesn't start. I don't start cooking. Would you be allowed to do that? The answer is, although if you would do that, it wouldn't be considered cooking. The Chachamim said you're not allowed to do this. Meaning, Rabbanan, you're not allowed to do this for a simple reason: you may forget. You may forget and leave it there until it actually gets cooked. So you can't put yourself in a position that you may end up leaving it there and it will get cooked. I want to skip now to number 8 to contrast this. May one place food to which Bishul applies near the fire, where the heat is strong enough to warm the food, but not intense enough to bring it to the starting point of Bishul. In other words, what if the fire is not strong enough to bring this bottle of water to Yatziletis? Even if I leave it there for 3 hours, all it'll do is warm it up a little bit. It's not strong enough, either because I put it far enough away from the fire, and it's not strong enough where it is, it's far enough away, or the fire is very, very small, so even though it's very close to the fire. The point is, where I put it, even if I leave it there for a long time, it's still not going to get Yatziletis. Is that okay? The answer is, yeah, of course, why not? There's no problem with warming it up, as long as it's going to be less than Yatziletis, you didn't do anything. The only problem in the previous question was where we were concerned that since the fire has the ability to cook it, you may forget and leave it there till it gets cooked. But in this case, where even if you leave it there for a long time, you cannot cook it, so there's nothing wrong with warming it next to such a fire. Going back to number 7.
So on a hot plate that is not with the thing that moves for the temperature, we are allowed to put the baby pot in it?
The baby pot is going to be a little bit different. It means a regular food, and even if you leave it there, I don't know how hot those hot plates get. My understanding is even the warmers, most foods, if you leave it there for a long, long time, you'll be able to warm up part of it. Make a Yatziletis. If it's such a low temperature that it won't be able to make a Yatziletis, then you wouldn't be allowed to put it there. It can't become cooked.
My hot plate, even though it's just like a warmer, it does get it to Yatziletis.
I think most would.
Yeah.
Most would.
Okay.
In one place, now I'm going to 7, may one place a baby bottle near the fire to make it warm but not hot. So here I'm asking a little bit different. you're putting a baby bottle, not a regular food that you really wanted to get hot, but since it's Shabbos, so you're gonna try to take it off before it reaches Yatziledes. Here it's a baby bottle that you don't even want it to really get hot because then it's gonna be too hot for the baby. Get warm, maybe it would be a little bit more lenient. So some poskim say that in such a case where you don't really want it to get hot, you would be allowed to do it. Only in the previous case where you really want it to get hot, you're not allowed to make it get hot. Then we were concerned you're going to leave it there. But in this case where you don't really want it to get hot, because that's not what you're looking to accomplish, right? You only want the bottle to get warm. So in such a case, we're not concerned that you're going to forget and leave it there. That's what some say. Others say that we would only be lenient if something's going to get ruined if it gets too hot. But in this case, it won't really get ruined. It'll get too hot, and then you'll wait, and you'll have to wait till it cools down. Since it won't get ruined, we're still concerned that you may forget it. So therefore, initially, one should be strict and not put the baby bottle in such a place. And if you need to warm up the baby bottle, you should choose a different method of warming it up, such as immersing it, let's say, in warm water or something, right? You should rather choose a different method of warming it up. But if you don't have any other way to warm it up, this is your only way, then you could be lenient. Then you could be lenient, follow the lenient opinion, that since you don't really want it to get too hot, we're not concerned you're going to forget. Talking about too hot, right? Okay, number 9. May the cholent be moved from one fire to another on Shabbos.
Yes, as long as you've got it in your hand.
Okay, so well.
And it's cooked.
Oh, that's the main part of the question that we're asking over here. If the cholent is not yet fully cooked, right? It's not revushal called sarkoi. That means everything in the cholent, the beans, potatoes, the meat. As long as not everything in the cholent is fully cooked, then it cannot be moved even from a higher flame to a lower flame. Why? Because the second you remove it from the higher flame, it's on no flame at this point. So then when you put it on the lower flame, you're putting it from no flame to a low flame, which is causing it to cook faster.
It is from higher, it's not from low.
I know, but once you took it off, it's on no flame. So therefore, there's no way you can move it from one flame to another, even from a higher flame to a lower flame. If, however, it's fully cooked already, means everything in the cholent is fully cooked, the meat, the beans, the potatoes, if everything in the cholent pot is fully cooked, then it's allowed to go from one flame to another flame, even from a low flame to a higher flame, provided that you had all the conditions of chazara. Meaning, in this case, mainly because we're talking about that it's fully cooked and obviously hot. Okay, so provided that you didn't put it down in between, and that the fire that you're moving it to has a blech, you'll be able to move it. But if it's not yet fully cooked, having a blech doesn't help you, right? Because by moving it closer to the flame, you are causing it to cook. So by moving it to a higher flame, or even once you removed it from the higher flame, to put it on the lower flame, you're also causing it to cook more, right? When you put it back on the lower flame, like we explained. So before the cholent's fully cooked, you have to be careful not to move it around. On Friday night, the next question we're asking basically be the yevid. Once it was done, could the cholent be eaten? So the case is like this. On Friday night, before the cholent was completely cooked, one mistakenly moved the cholent pot that was on the blech closer to the flame. Pushed it, let's say the fire was over here, the cholent pot was over here, and you were moving things around, and you ended up moving the cholent closer to the fire.
I would say yes, because it was by accident.
Because it was by accident. So it says in Shulchan Aruch that if somebody cooks on Shabbos, even by accident, you're not allowed to eat the food on Shabbos. Only after Shabbos you could eat it. Since in the end of the day, this food was cooked on Shabbos in a manner that it's not allowed. So it's called Ma'aseh Shabbos, something that was done on Shabbos, something that was, and it's not allowed to be eaten on the regular, that's generally the rule. However,
You have gas, lots of gas.
we don't say that. But what I'm going to differentiate over here is the following. If the cholent is less than halfway cooked, okay, less than Michael Ben Nisoy, and you caused it to cook more by moving it closer to the fire, then the cholent may not be eaten. However, if the cholent was more than halfway cooked, when you moved it over, it was more than Michael Ben Nisoy, was more than halfway cooked, then you're going to be allowed to eat it b'diavad. If it was meaning, l'chatchila, if you ask, am I allowed to move this cholent closer to the flame? So the answer is what? If it's not yet fully cooked, you're not allowed to, even though it's halfway cooked, right? We don't consider halfway cooked to be cooked. We say it has to be fully cooked to be able to move it closer to the flame. But b'diavad, if it was already done, and now the question is, could you eat the food? So we can rely on certain opinions that hold that after it's halfway cooked, you're allowed to move it around, you're allowed to move it closer to the flame. And again, that's an opinion which is not the halacha, but there's such a rule that even though there's certain times, even though an opinion is not the halacha, but after the fact we can rely on it so as not to say that the food is not allowed to be eaten. In other words, in order that we should be able to use the food, we can rely on certain opinions that are not really the halacha. But this is going to be one of those cases. There are opinions of great Rishonim that held that once the food is halfway cooked, so that was their definition of the end point of cooking. After that, you're allowed to do whatever you want. So even though in Shulchan Aruch we say no, I have to wait till it's fully cooked in order to cause it to cook more. But after the fact, to say that the cholent is still allowed to be eaten, we can rely after the fact on those opinions. So initially, certainly, if the cholent is not yet fully cooked, you're not allowed to move it over. That was the previous question. But after the fact, if it's more than halfway cooked when it was done, then one can be lenient and eat the cholent on Shabbos. Less than halfway cooked, then you're not allowed to eat the cholent. You eat it after Shabbos, but not on Shabbos. Is it permissible to stir a hot pot of cholent?
On the fire, no.
On the fire after Zoom. So let me just explain for a moment.
No.
Actually, in this case, actively stirring, there's no difference. If it's on the fire or off the fire, you're not allowed to in both cases. But there's a difference. Before the food is fully cooked, then stirring is a Torah prohibition.
Yes.
Because you're causing it to cook faster, better, or whatever. But after the food is fully cooked, so technically there shouldn't be any reason why you're not allowed to stir the food. If it's fully cooked, then any additional cooking that you do is inconsequential. So how come you're not allowed to stir it even though it's fully cooked? The halacha is you're not allowed to stir even after it's fully cooked. You're still not allowed to stir. Yeah, so we gave two reasons. One reason was that we were concerned you're going to make a mistake and think that it's fully cooked, but really it's not. And the second reason was that even though it's not actually cooking because the food is fully cooked, it just looks like cooking. When you stand over the fire and you stir the pot, it looks like cooking. So therefore, you're not allowed to stir. So the answer is you're not allowed to actively stir, whether even on the fire, even if the food is off the fire, you're still not supposed to actively stir. So in both cases, even after, if you want to actively stir, you have to first transfer it into the klisheni, and in the klisheni you could actively stir it.
But okay, so that's different from, so you can't give out the cholent on the heat because you're putting the spoon in?
So that's the next question. Is it permissible to ladle cholent directly from a hot pot, to ladle it out? So there we said that in a certain sense, scooping out the cholent causes a little bit to stir. So this was like an extension of the Isser, of the prohibition of stirring, okay? But over here we said we're only strict after the food is fully cooked, since stirring itself was only a rabbinic prohibition, so we only extended it to ladling while the food was on the fire. Once the food is off the fire, you're allowed to ladle out the food.
And then we'll do the chazan.
If you want to put it back on the fire, you're going to have to have the conditions of Hazara. So basically,
I was going to say it was interesting because on Shabbat lunch I was in the kitchen with a very frum woman on President Street, and I was watching closely what she was doing.
could be you know the halach is better than her now because you're really learning it.
I mean, obviously I didn't. I think so. What she did with I was very closely watching what she did with the cholent, and so what she did, she must have done. It was on the blech, and she must have just slightly moved it. So she must have slightly moved it to the cooler pot to serve it. Would you be allowed? I don't
Yeah.
know to take
If
it
it's
completely
fully
off.
cooked, yeah.
You can transfer it to the cooler pot, yeah.
Right. So we said that, and then she,
Then she served it.
because moving it to the cooler part, that it's considered off the fire for these purposes of stirring. It's not on the fire anymore, so therefore it's considered like it's off the fire, so you could ladle out the challah. But it's not considered fully removed from the whole fire, and therefore, even though you weren't holding it up in the air, you could still push it back afterwards. That's like that.
Yeah,
It has
that's
because usually, if you take it off the fire completely, you'd only be allowed to put it back if you were holding it up the whole time. That's very difficult to do.
Right.
But on the blech, you could, as long as you move it away from the fire, you could serve. But it's not considered totally removed from the fire that you're not allowed to put it back unless you were holding it up in the air. You could still put it
Yeah, in
back.
the hot
even-
plate we are must hold it.
Yeah.
It's not like the black.
because the whole thing is hot.
Yeah.
But if it's a warmer,
I think it's actually.
I know, but even if it's a warmer that you can't control, you can't control the temperature.
But it does get much.
It gets very hot, but still, some people's held that since it can't really cook from beginning to end, you don't need the conditions of Chazara for that. Others disagreed. There were different opinions. So you could definitely be lenient with your conditions of Chazara. Like you could take it off and just keep your hand on it.
Yeah, this is what we do. We need to keep the hand. And we
Right.
have the
Usually we try to keep it, like hold it actually up in the air, but in that case,
we cannot.
we don't, in that case, since some say you don't need the conditions of Chazara, you could just keep your hand on it and it's good enough. Okay, so is it permissible to ladle cholent out directly from the hot pot? So I guess, again, to summarize it, so while the pot is on the fire, you're not supposed to, you're not allowed to, it's an extension of stirring. However, once it's removed from the fire, we weren't machmir. Even though active stirring is not allowed when it's off the fire, but ladling, we were not machmir when it came to ladling when it's off the fire. So that's allowed to be done once the food was removed from the fire.
Can I ask a question relating to the previous thing? So, question 11, you were saying point 2, even after the
Pot was
pot was
off the fire.
removed from the fire, you still can't stir it because you could make a mistake and think it's fully cooked, so, but you can transfer it to the clé chenille. But what if when you transfer it to the clé chenille, you see it's not, no, so you can't, so once,
No, so in the cliché, you could stir it regardless, even if it's not cooked. Now, once it's in the cliché, stirring won't help it cook. Only in the cliché, the stirring could help it cook.
Yes.
13. Does the prohibition of stirring or ladling apply to boiling water? Let's say you just have plain boiled water. Is there an isser? Is there a prohibition of stirring it or not? So the answer is stirring, active stirring should not be done, even to plain boiling water. I don't know why you would want to actively stir it, but you wouldn't be allowed to do that. But ladling out while it's on the fire is allowed. Even though usually you're not allowed to ladle out when it's on the fire. But in the case of plain boiling water, ladling out is allowed. What's the difference? Because when it comes to plain boiled water, you have to remember which reason is applicable. We said there's 2 reasons why even though something's cooked, you're still not allowed to stir. One reason was because you're going to make a mistake, and one reason is because it looks like cooking. So
Here we
when it
cannot have
comes
a
to
mistake.
If it's
Oh,
boiling,
so
it's
here-
clearly
here
cooked.
you're not going to make a mistake. By a food, you think it's fully cooked, but you can make a mistake, right? By water, you can't make a mistake. If it's hot, it's cooked. So that reason is not applicable. The only reason that's applicable is that it looks like cooking. When you stand over a pot and you stir, so only active stirring is something which looks like cooking. ladling doesn't look like cooking. So therefore, in this case, there's no issue with ladling, only with stirring. Is it okay to cover a hot pot of food while it's on the fire?
No.
We're talking about, again, if it's not yet fully cooked, there's no question it's not allowed. It's going to cause it to cook faster. If it's fully cooked,
It's okay.
that's really what the intention of the question was. If it's fully cooked, it's okay. And the novelty of this halacha is that even though we find in the Gemara that we compare putting a cover on a pot, the Gemara tells us that it has the same effect as stirring the pot. So we might say that the same way you're not allowed to stir the pot while it's on the fire, even though it's fully cooked. So the place can say, well, we don't have to, since this whole halacha of stirring after it's fully cooked is only an fully cooked. Like, well, we struggle to figure out why you're not allowed to stir, right? So it's enough that we do what it says, and we don't stir and we don't ladle out. But putting on the cover, we don't have to make that. And since there's a different Gemara somewhere else that says that putting on the cover has the same effect as ladling, so therefore you're not allowed to put it on.
We are not,
Once it's fully cooked, we don't have to be strict. Before it's fully cooked, then it's no question. It's causing it to cook faster. It's not allowed. But after it's fully cooked, we don't extend the isser. We don't extend the prohibition of stirring to putting on the cover. So therefore, you're allowed to, if it's fully cooked, you're allowed to put on the cover even though it's on the fire. Number 15, one wishes to remove challah from the oven at the start of the meal and leave the chicken inside the oven to finish cooking until the main course. So basically, in this case, the and challah in the oven at the same time, right before Shabbos. The chicken's, let's say, halfway cooked, so there's no issue of a blech, whatever it is, right? Chicken's, but he figures like this: by the time the meal starts, the chicken's still not going to be ready. But he'll take out the challah then; it'll be nice and warm and crispy.
no, because then when you close,
Exactly.
make it.
Then when you're closing, if the chicken's not yet fully cooked, by closing the oven door, it's like putting the cover on the pot. You're causing the chicken to cook faster, so that's not an option. In the previous scenario, same case, what's if the chicken is fully cooked? So you're just leaving it in to warm. So I turn the oven on to 200 degrees, let's say. Alright. Turn it on to 200 degrees, and I leave the chicken and the challah there together. And I'm going to take out the challah at the beginning of the meal and the chicken at the end of the meal. Forget it even about the challah and the chicken. Even if I just leave the chicken in, is that an option? Or is there an issue that since the oven is thermostat controlled, so when I open, means the fire's not burning the whole entire time. Fire goes on and then goes off, on and off, to maintain the temperature.
Yeah.
So it could be that when I open the door and I let in the cold air, that's going to cause the fire to go on.
You said that there are
So this is a very famous classic machlokes, and I'm not going to, mix into that machlokes. So just explain both sides of the coin. Those that say that it's allowed is because of the following. First of all, you're not doing it directly. You're not lighting the fire directly. It's just called a grama. It's causative. The Hebrew term is grama. Gimel, Reish, Mem, Aleph. It's only you're causing indirectly. In other words, you're allowing cold air in, which is going to cause the fire to go on. So it's only a causative. Number two, it's not your intention to turn the fire on. Davar she'eino miskaven, it's not your intention. And number three, we're not even sure if your action is going to result in the fire going on, because it could be the fire is actually on right now. You don't know if the fire's on or not. So it could be that your opening the door is actually going to have zero effect. right? Because the fire is already on currently. So because of these three factors together, some say it is allowed to open the door. And others disagree and say that although it's only causative, the fact that it's not your intention is irrelevant because it's for sure going to result. It's an inevitable consequence. Secretia, it's for sure going to happen, right? For sure, the fire is going to, meaning you allowing cold air is going to cause the fire to go on earlier than it would have. It's not, you can't say it's not your intention. It's an inevitable consequence. The fact that it's only causative also doesn't really make something permissible. It maybe makes it that it's no longer a Torah prohibition of lighting a fire. It's only a rabbinic prohibition, but it's still a prohibition. And the fact that you're not sure if you're causing anything to happen, so that's a suffix, and by a suffix you have to be strict. So therefore nothing really helps you in the end of the day that you should be allowed to do it. That's why some are strict. So this was the age-old machlekes. It wasn't so much with the oven. The oven, there are other ways of keeping stuff warm, so you could avoid the whole problem. But it was with the refrigerator. The refrigerator, the question was the opposite. When you open the door to the fridge, letting in hot air, which is going to cause the motor to go on earlier. Temperature, the refrigerator set at, let's say, 37 degrees. So right now it's off. It's insulated very well. The motor's not on the whole
But
time.
it's not visual.
No, so again, the issue is not that you're causing bishul. In the previous question, we weren't causing bishul either because the food was fully cooked.
Yeah.
The issue was only havara, causing fire, lighting a fire. So over here, the issue is not lighting a fire. The issue, that's what you mean to say. In other words, you're not lighting a fire, you're just making electricity. So it could be that's why people were more lenient when it came to the fridge. Because what you're doing is only an issa d'rabbanan. You're only making electricity. You're not actually making a fire. On the other hand, the refrigerator is stricter because you don't have that other factor of that you're not sure if the fire is actually on. By a fridge, you know, you could hear either the motor is on or off. So therefore, we could say, wait till you hear the motor on. That's it.
But we define electricity as fire.
No,
We don't?
not halachically.
No, electricity.
Well, then what
has
is
to
it?
do with ma'agal. You create.
That's according to some mafarshim that you're creating a circuit.
Yes,
It's like
and
pointing and building something. Most mafarshim don't learn like that. It's not clear 100% what the malacha involved is, but the consensus is that it's not a Torah prohibition. Creating electricity by itself, it's not a Torah prohibition. Fire, if you have an incandescent bulb, that's called fire halachically. That would be lighting a fire. But making, just generating electricity.
Making a car. You don't have
Well, that
In
would be
a
a spark
car,
plug.
they
no,
say
just
it is
use
a
the
deraisa,
engine,
the
not to
engine.
drive. Use the engine.
Yeah.
Use the same.
So, but then these kind of lights they're not fire, they're
According
what?
to most, is only a rabbinic prohibition.
It's a rabbinic prohibition. What, because it looks like fire, or what is it?
It's not, they're creating something. You're creating something new,
Okay.
which is an issa d'rabbanan. Number 17, describe the function of a Shabbos mode oven and what issues are avoided with this function. I'll stop at the end of this question. Unless you guys want to go a little further, I don't know.
Well, we have extra long davening today.
Right, so we'll have to stop. Okay, so this, I just want to do this because it's connected to the other three questions that we just did. But a Shabbos mode oven is especially, it was designed by a Rav together with the companies that make the oven. And it's a certain mode that you press, like, say, two buttons together and you hold it for like 10 seconds, then it goes on to Shabbos mode. And what does Shabbos mode do? So it does a lot of things that are helpful to be able to use the oven for Shabbos. So for example, usually when you open the oven door, a light goes on. So this will disable the light, okay? Another thing is that usually the oven is thermostat controlled, right? The issue that we were describing, that if you set it to 250 degrees, so the oven goes on and off based on what temperature it is. So by you opening the door, you can be causing the oven to go on. When you put it on Shabbos mode, it makes it go by time intervals. So let's say if you set it to 250, it's going to go on for 2 minutes every 20 minutes. You set it for 300, it'll go on for 3 minutes every 20 minutes, right? It goes by time intervals. So it doesn't go by exact temperature. So even if you open the door, you're not causing the fire to go on.
So the temperature's actually going to be a little less accurate.
It's going to be less accurate. You could burn your food sometimes. You could absolutely going to be less accurate.
Because where in the world can you buy Shabbos
Mode?
ovens? I mean, I guess
Everywhere. Any store sells Shabbos mode ovens.
But maybe here, but not in London.
All the big companies make it now. General Electric, Frigidaire, every company makes Shabbos mode. Shabbos mode ovens and Shabbos mode
They cost more?
refrigerator.
Cost more?
What?
Do they cost more?
No.
But I guess because it's less of them, there's
Just
probably
another
only
feature.
certain ones, so it's probably going to be more expensive.
Obviously, it's going to only be made in the, meaning the very, very basic oven that, let's say that the $300, $400 oven, like the cheapest oven you could buy, doesn't have any computer in it.
Yeah.
Just the fire. So it doesn't have a computer, it can't have a Shabbos mode. The only thing it has is a thermostat. There's no computer in it, which is why they don't break as much. These that have they're controlled by computers, and then it's not more expensive. It's another thing that they program into the computer that it can make a Shabbos mode, a different setting in the computer. So that's something also that Shabbos mode does. They do claim, and for this for sure it helps, because it's not controlled by the thermostat. They also claim that you don't need a blech anymore. That means you can put food in the oven when the food is less than a third of the way cooked, less than halfway cooked, and you still don't need it.
All opinions?
No, the Rav who designed it claims that it's good enough for that as well. However, why is that? Because when it's on Shabbos mode, you can't adjust it. You have to take it off Shabbos mode in order to adjust it, or something like that. So his understanding is that that takes away the concern of the blech, right? So the whole idea of the blech is so you shouldn't adjust the flame, and over here, when it's in Shabbos mode, you can't adjust the flame. With this, most people disagree. Most people hold that just because you now have to press 2 buttons instead of 1, that doesn't make it that it's that you can't adjust the flame. You could adjust the flame, you just have to press 2 buttons instead of 1. So therefore, you either have to have a blech or the food has to still be, halfway cooked or something. So even though the one who designed it claims that it helps, that you don't need a blech, most Rabbanim don't agree with him on that point. Doesn't mean you can't use a Shabbos mode oven. It just means that it doesn't help for this particular issue. It doesn't help for it. It certainly helps for the other ones. In my oven, the light is broken. Right when we got it, the light was broken. It was an expensive oven, but the light was broken.
They give you a discount?
I didn't get it. No. I purposely didn't get it fixed because of Shabbos. I didn't want to.
But then, is it a Shabbos oven with a tent?
It has a Shabbos mode, but I don't know. It's complicated about it. It's confusing to use the Shabbos mode. I only used it once or twice. Oh, another feature that it has, by the way, which is also very helpful, is the more expensive ovens that have by computer. Basically, they have an automatic turn-off feature for safety. These people sometimes leave their oven on and they forget to turn it off. So the oven turns off automatically after either 6 or 12 hours. It's a safety feature, right? But when you have Yontif, you can't cook for the second day's Yontif because your oven's automatically going to turn off in the middle of the first day. You can't leave it on for the second days. So the Shabbos mode overrides that safety feature that the oven could stay on. So these are all very, very helpful things. A Rav designed it. A Rav from
even 3-day Yontif. Even 3-day Yontif.
Yeah. It overrides this feature until you turn it off Shabbos mode. You can't stay on these modes for too long. The machine will break, whatever it is.
Not for
an oven, but by a fridge, they say you have to remember to turn it off Shabbos mode right after Yom Tov. It's not good for the fridge if it's on for too long.
We need to give you back because
No, I want you to keep it.
If you could keep it, that would be
She
better.
was writing it. She wasn't writing the answers on it. She was writing the answers on a separate paper.
Oh.
No, you keep it. I want you to keep it.